We live stream all of our meetings.
And we are live on YouTube.
All right, everybody. Welcome to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It is Tuesday, April 29th, and we are continuing to take testimony on H-181, an act relating to residential and commercial building energy standards. And we're going to go around the room and introduce ourselves, including our folks joining us on Zoom. And then we always like to ask everybody who's in the room to introduce themselves. That's okay. First name only, if that's better. Yep. Okay. I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester.
Richard Bailey, Lamoille 2.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Dara Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Kleppner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Lawrence Spilia, Wyndham 2.
Representative Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury.
Jack Locker, Committee Assistant.
Mark Hughes, Schoolhouse.
Great.
Andrew Brewer with Downs Racklin and Martin, and in the room on Vermont Builders and Remodelers Association, which Jason is one.
Great.
Jason Webster with Huntington Homes.
Super.
Hi, Peter Tucker with the Vermont Association of Realtors.
Great.
I am Jameson. I am one of the parents from the Schoolhouse kids.
Super.
Elliot from Schoolhouse. Donovan from Schoolhouse. Bobby from Schoolhouse. Anders from Schoolhouse. Sam from Schoolhouse.
All right.
That's all right.
Always an amazing day when we have students join us. All right. We are going to be hearing from Jason today. So Jason, do you want to take the hot seat?
Yeah, I can't wait. Truly, it is the hot seat in here today.
I know it is, unfortunately, the hot seat. For the record,
my name is Jason Webster. My brother and I are co-owners, operators of Huntington Homes. We are a modular manufacturing company located right here in East Montpelier, Vermont. We currently employ about 85 people, and since 1978 have built about 5,000 houses. Half in Vermont, other half the rest of New England, with a concentration in Massachusetts.
Great.
Yeah.
Jason, do you have a written testimony today, or just going to chat with us?
I do have something I wrote that's a little different from what I'm going to chat, but
That's fine.
I can send that.
That would be great. If you could
Okay.
send it to Jack, he'll
Okay.
send it to the committee, and
Yes.
we'll post it on our webpage.
Okay, we'll do.
Great.
So what I was hoping to do today is I know I'm here for H-181. But what I wanted to do was to zoom out a little bit to give a view of the way that the energy code is kind of touching home builders, and by extension, Vermonters, as in its current form. And I think there's two places I want to touch. One is how the current energy code really is unfair to builders. And then the second place I want to touch and come over to is kind of how unfair, by extension, it's unfair to Vermonters as well, in that. I think there's been some testimony already about the energy code and how H-181 is trying to address some of the things. I'm not going to go into all of those things, but just in summary, what I think you've heard, and if you want clarification or more questions, I'm happy to answer it. But I think what you've heard on the residential side, I think it's really important to recognize right off the top, biggest problem is that Vermont, we have a standalone energy code, but we do not have a building code. We do not have a building agency. We do not have the kind of the overarching infrastructure for which to house an energy code. And Vermont truly stands alone. It's not a great place to be. Vermont truly stands alone in being without a building code for single family residential housing. Every other state has one. We have a sort of building code for single family and for multifamily and commercial structures administered by the Department of Fire Safety. They do a great job with what they've done. Mike DeRocher and his group do a great job kind of administering what they're doing. But as their name implies, Department of Fire Safety, Division of Fire Safety, they really are focused on fire safety. There's not much there for what a builder would see as a core building code program, right? So they're looking mostly at egress standards, kind of making sure handrails aren't such that a firefighter is going to get their, their fire hose caught on it as they're rushing up the stairs. But there's really nothing in there that from a building code standard is looking at building science, structural issues, light and ventilation, more kind of like is this house going to be, was it built properly and is it going to stand the test of time, right? So that's kind of the big sphere of where we are. We then are trying to have an energy code, but it sits outside of any agency or any structure that's ever been created to administer it. I think you've also, with that, probably the other testimonies you've heard, there's low compliance with it on the single family side. The last statistic I've seen was a study in 2015, which showed that only like 52% of houses met the standards at the time. The standard at the time was a pretty low bar. It was, from an energy standpoint, was really codifying what all good builders were already building anyway. Versus today, 2024, the current energy code is a much higher bar. I don't know of any studies that have gone out to find compliance. I think they're working on a study right now to find out where compliance is against the 24 code. I'm going to bet anybody in this room a ginger ale, it's under 10%. Like it's very low. So we know we have low compliance. We know we don't have a building code program. Energy code kind of sits out as standalone. And kind of where the proposals are to move it forward, I don't feel are really addressing the problem. They're not, which is no agency, right? It is no structure, right? The proposals kind of to move it forward are continuing to be along self-certification and then some education and training piece to the builders. And I don't think that's going to work. I just don't think it's going to work. It's anywhere, like if I use, because we build in Massachusetts, I can kind of pull from Massachusetts as to what's happening there. Every builder, every project in Massachusetts, there's 100% compliance 100% of the time. And that's because there is no option to not have compliance, right? It is not self-certification at the end, right? There is an actual state agency that tells us how we're going to, first of all, we have to be licensed, which we're not in Vermont. And then it's going to tell us how we have to apply for a permit, construct it, and do it.
Yeah, Rep Cutner.
And are there on-site inspections of residential construction projects in process in Massachusetts?
In Massachusetts, of course, yeah. So when we build in Massachusetts, we have to figure out what we're building, right? So we agree with a client, we design a house, figure out what we're going to build with a client, and then in order to build anything, you have to apply for a building permit, and the building permit. In part of the application process is you demonstrating how you're going to meet all applicable codes. So you apply and you say, you're looking at structural codes, you're looking at plumbing codes, you're looking at electrical codes, and you're looking at energy codes. It's a subset, right? Energy is a piece of the larger thing. You apply, you get a permit, and then as you build, there are inspections. And then at the end of construction, the local building official will sign off on it, of the whole thing. And so it's not self-certified, right? They're not. I like to substitute things to show how the current system doesn't work. And an example I'll use is, let's not talk about energy codes. Let's talk about septic codes or sewage codes, right? Right now in the state of Vermont, if you want to build a septic system on your property, there has to be a licensed engineer, right? Builders aren't licensed. You have to have a licensed engineer following state guidelines, following the state codes, apply to the state to get a permit. A permit is issued. A contractor who isn't licensed installs it. After construction, the engineer who designed the system has to inspect it, send in a certification letter to certify that the system was constructed. Think of how absurd it would be if that program was administered the same way that the energy codes are, which is where there is a written standard, but then contractor designs it, contractor installs it, right? And then contractor certifies it at the end, right? Meanwhile, and this ties into where I want to talk about the impossible situation or the impossible position that builders are put in doing this, is that has anyone built a house? Has anyone built? All right, so building a house, residential construction, does not package into a nice tidy box, right? Of building a house. Like, it's messy, it's complicated. There are all these competing interests that are coming together of you have design, you have what a client wants, you have to layer in budget, you have to layer in permits, you have to layer in timing, you have to layer in subcontractors, the realities of subcontractors not showing up. You have to layer in the father-in-law's opinion, right? Like all of these certain things, right? And we're trying to get to an end. Ultimately, right, in most construction, zooming out a little bit, most construction in Vermont is one-off on your lot where a client is hiring a builder to come onto their property to build the house, right? Less of new construction in Vermont is, and mostly it's Chittenden County, is where developers are permitting out large developments. They're making the calls as to what the product is that gets built. They build it, and then at the end, they sell it, right? Fundamental difference about the two methods of construction, the two styles of homes, is that in the development builders, those builders are making the decisions all the way along the lines, right? They're deciding what the specs are, they're deciding what to build, and then they sell it. Most on your lot builders, which is pretty much everything outside of Chittenden County, there is a client at the table, right? And the builder is not going to build anything that they can't get paid for, right? Again, back to the septic analogy, right? If I came in as a builder and looked at a client's soils and was like, these are terrible, right? We need to do a $35,000 advanced treatment system with a big mound. And the client says, I don't think so. Like, I think we're going to be okay if you just put in a conventional system, right? And then the builder, and then, right, if it was in self-certification, like how many times would that happen, right? Where they just do it versus that system has the backstopping of an actual program where the contractor can say, look, don't get mad at me. I'm just here to like build your septic system for you, right? And the rules say this is what you need to do. And there's a backstop of a program.
Sorry to interrupt. Scott's had his hand up for a while. Representative Campbell?
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry to interrupt too, Jason, but I wanted to backtrack to Massachusetts. How detailed does for a one-off type of house, do plans and specs have to be at the outset in order to get the permit?
Yeah, well, for it's I can answer how that applies to us. I don't know where his camera is. There it is. I can speak to how it applies to us. We are an off-site manufacturing company, right? So a house in Massachusetts is actually built in East Montpelier. And because we're building off-site, we actually have this whole nother layer of approvals and engineering that sits on top of us. Because the local building inspector in the state of Massachusetts isn't coming into our shop to inspect it. So we have a much more robust approval process for that. To answer the question, a simple 2,000 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath house probably has 150 pages of stamped engineering documents that goes along with it. That's then submitted to the town for permits. That's unique to us, right? I think a typical document, I think you could look to how are commercial structures being built here, right? And that package might be 5, 6, 8 pages stamped as to what it is. Yeah.
Okay, so I understand the way you guys build, you probably have all this stuff wired and you're much more comprehensive in your documentation than a regular, a licensed general contractor who's building a house for one person in
Right.
Massachusetts. But I think one of the hurdles that we have always heard about even having residential contractors registered in Vermont is, oh my God, we're going to have written contracts.
Yeah.
So if there was another hurdle, at least from the perspective of contractors, requiring a permitting and therefore requiring plans and specs at the outset, that's just another thing that's going to get in the way, I think, for some people.
Yeah.
That's why I was asking.
And that is the crux, right? That's the intersection. That's the fork in the road. And that is, I think, the decision that Vermont has to make to go forward, right? The current energy code is an advanced energy code, right? It is beyond what we have historically built. If we were already building what the energy code is asking for, I don't think we'd have the energy code, right? In it itself, its existence in it itself tells you that it's a higher bar than what's already being built. And I think that's the fork in the road of where we are, is that we need to decide what's more important to us. Is it more important to us to have and enforce advanced energy building codes and elevate new construction here? Or do we just stay the course and continue to do what we've always done, which is essentially zero regulation on new single family homes? I truly believe you can't have both, right? You cannot raise the bar without any of the infrastructure to train, license, inspect, and certify that on the end, because we get into that, we get into that situation, right? Compliance, I think, is already at 10%, right? And so without the mechanisms for enforcement, we're just not going to get there. We're not going to execute. We're not going to get to the whatever the code is asking us to do. So that's the unfair to builders part, right? It's putting builders in an impossible situation where you're asking, the state of Vermont is saying, we don't have the appetite to create rules, right? We don't have the appetite to regulate you. We don't have the budget to administer this code. We're just going to say, builders, you need to go do it, right? And what makes it all the scarier and the worse for builders is that in statute, right, in the enabling legislation of the energy codes is a provision, is a damages provision that says that it is at the contractor's liability for all costs to bring a house built to code up to code, right? Backing up, there is rubber meets the road. There is a giant disconnect right now between a lot of contractors. Hopefully most contractors know what they're supposed to be building, but we have clients that don't want to pay for it, right? We have clients that are saying, I don't need to do that, right? It's not going to be enforced. The advanced code costs more money, right? The reason that the market wasn't already building it is because it costs more than to not build it, right? And so now we're enforced with going to ask clients to pay for it. They're saying no. If we build it, the client then has in statute, I don't know of anybody that's used this yet, but it is a slam dunk case to go back after a contractor and say, you didn't insulate my basement and the energy code said you were supposed to. It's a slam dunk case for them to get the contractor to go back and do it entirely at their cost, right? When there's a very good chance that the client at the beginning was the reason it didn't happen because they didn't want to pay for it, right? And again, I'm talking specifically I hope I'm talking specifically about the on your lot construction that's happening outside of Chittenden County, right? I would hope that the contractors in Chittenden County or the on your lot development contractors, they're making the decisions and they are baking that stuff in because they need to. So that's the contractor part. It's just summary. It's hugely unfair of what you're asking us to do when you won't do it yourselves. The second part is, and the more fun part is, for me, is talking about why the advanced energy code is bad to Vermonters without an enforcement or a building code mechanism to scaffold the energy code, right? So I'm going to talk. You can push me and I will dork out on this as hard as you want me to dork out, or I can stay very surface about building science, right? Buildings, if you want to build a good house, you only have to know one thing. Besides making sure snow doesn't crush it, right? Or wind doesn't blow it over. The only thing you have to know is water is enemy number one. You have to keep water out of a building. But water is okay as long as drying, right? Wetting is okay so long as drying is better. So if a house is going to get wet, it's okay as long as it dries more than it got wet. Everybody immediately thinks they visualize bulk water, right? They think of a building envelope failure, a leaking roof, a leaking windows, or whatever, where you have water that's leaking in through a construction deficiency into the wall cavity, right? Those are bad. Most builders are pretty good about avoiding those. Most owners are pretty good about noticing those and fixing those, right? That's not what I'm concerned about with the new energy code. The other component of wetting is it happens continuously in every structure all winter long, and it is condensation. So it is, if we visualize a wall assembly, right? Here's the thickness of an exterior wall. This side is the inside, this side is the outside. In the middle of winter, it is relatively warm and humid on the inside of this house. On this side of the wall, which is probably only that thick, on this side of the wall, it's dry and it's cold. Energy is always going to move from high to low, right? So temperature is always trying to go that way. Moisture is always trying to go that way. Inside, right, it's 70 degrees, it's 10 below. Somewhere inside this space is the temperature at which water in the air condenses and turns into liquid water, right? This happens consistently all winter long, always. There's nothing you're going to do to stop condensation, right? It just happens. The reason old farmhouses still stand strong is because they have no insulation. And so what happens is that condensation is happening inside a wall cavity, but there's enough energy that's leaking through that wall cavity to dry it out all winter long, right? So drying is better than wetting. It doesn't get wet. It's still standing there, right? The purpose of energy codes is to slow that energy transmission down, right? The whole purpose of an energy code is to make a wall good enough that the energy can't go through it. Condensation still happens, right? Energy code did not slow condensation down, right? It may have changed inside the wall where it's happening, but it's still happening. But now we have significantly less energy movement that's happening through that wall to dry that moisture out. There are ways to do this right. Unfortunately, there are more ways to do it wrong. And the guidance for how that wall assembly is built comes from the building code. And it is enforced by inspections. For the first time, the Vermont Energy Code in 2024 has required a layer of exterior insulation on a house that significantly changes the way or the ability for a wall to dry out. What's even worse about it is that the ratio of it, and this is where I could keep going on forever, but I see the glazing, so I'm going to stop. Just know this is that there are ways to do this right, and there are ways to do it where the wall is rotten in 10 years. And I'm not like sensationalizing this. I just saw photos of a 10-year-old house. I'm not going to say where it was. I just saw photos of a 10-year-old house where the outside wall sheathing, because they didn't have a layer right between their air barriers, vapor barriers, and the right type of insulation, that outside sheathing layer is gone. Right? Client called because the siding was blowing off their house every time the wind blew. It was like, why is this happening? And another contractor comes in, starts pulling siding off to realize, well, it's coming off because it's not nailed to anything anymore. And it was a tens of thousands of dollars of fix that no insurance company covered, right? Because it's mold, right? And they couldn't go back and sue the contractor because there is no standard of care. We don't have building codes, right? So the contractor was like, I built what you hired me to build. You agreed to that. Sorry to rob it. Out of pocket, tens of thousands of dollars to fix that. So it is very real that building this the wrong way is bad. So this is the bad to Vermonters part. What the the worst part of the whole thing is that the ratio of insulation layers that we have right now between what's inside the wall and what needs to be outside the wall, every single building scientist everywhere in our climate zone is going to tell you is bad news. So the easiest way for a contractor to hit the basic requirements of our current energy code, every building scientist is going to tell you is a dangerous one, right? And then we have nothing to backstop it. So that's the bad for Vermonters. I truly don't believe contractors are evil. I don't think contractors are knowingly building these wall assemblies. But collectively, Vermont doesn't train our contractors. The only way a contractor would know that that's not right is because they decided to somehow train themselves. Some do. The group that tends to build our highest end houses does. The contractors that aren't are tending to build our lower market houses, right? Most vulnerable Vermonters, right? So I almost wish that, and I hope that the houses that are being built for them don't meet code, right? I'm hoping that contractor knows nothing about it and they're still just building it the way that their grandfather or their dad taught them to do it, and not poorly trying to build it to, what the current energy code says. So there's my kind of bad for builders, bad for Vermonters. Tying into kind of H181. We want to keep studying it. I do think I'd like the ask for the working group to be able to review it before it's either before it goes back to LCAR. I've been on the working group since 2003. This last iteration of the code, there were some errors that made it that were in the document when it went to LCAR. LCAR, my understanding, is rubber stamped, right? There's no ability to amend. They did change the adoption timeline, and that there was some stuff that happened after the fact, but there wasn't really the ability to change it after there. The one piece of H181 that I don't agree with is fundamentally, building codes are about the protection of individual life and safety, right? It's police protection of powers, right? That's where we get zoning rules. That's where we get building codes from. I do think currently that there is too much advocacy, carbon advocacy inside the building codes. I'm not saying that that's not important, right? I do think we should be looking at, I do think we should be paying attention to that. But a life safety code for an individual project isn't necessarily the place to put that. I think it's better served with some of the that going beyond code, right? Going beyond, and beyond code means the move to all electric, going to all heat pumps, right? Or whatever, right? None of that's necessary for safe housing, right? We don't need heat pumps to have safe housing, right? Safe housing is just safe housing. I think any of that stuff that's beyond safety, right? So heat pumps, all electric, carbon, more carbon sensitive building materials, I don't think they should be in the code period. I think they should be moved out and that we should double down on the programs. So Efficiency Vermont, the ones that, that they're administering, where they can kind of incentivize the individual clients that want to go beyond it to go beyond it, right? But the core code should stop at what's a safe house to live in.
Sounds like you think it's going great.
Yeah.
Just
I-
kidding.
I don't, the part of the working groups, the building community and the architects, this is the other thing I like about H-181 of extending it to allow us the seat at the table. This really is the first time. I'm here because of that, right? I was asked to be here. We've been talking about this since 2003, right? Since 2003, we've said you can't have an energy code self-enforced. I mean, it makes no sense. Like a speed limit that's self-enforced. Like, if when you get home, why don't you send me a speeding ticket if you sped on the drive home, right? This is the first time that the building community and the architects, right, have been aligned on this, right? And it's a weird place for me to come in here, right? I'm not saying stop, right? I'm saying fork in the road, right? Decision, either stop or regulate us, right? Don't do both.
So I mean, this is a big, huge question, but assuming that the legislature at some point decided that the wise step was to enact a building code and figure out who was gonna, designate somebody to, oversee it and enforce it and all that. How do you feel about that?
I would, if we want advanced codes, right? If we want better buildings driven by codes, the floor, right? The code elevates the floor. That's the only way to do it, is to have a fully administered code program. What it does for the builder on your lot housing projects is it allows us to stay aligned with our clients instead of butting heads with the client, where we're saying, look, we know we don't have to build to code, but we should be doing this. And when they say, what's it cost? And they say no, right? So the only way we're going to get everybody to that higher level is when we can turn the building official into the bad actor, right? And we can say, well, we have to, because if we don't do this, right, if we don't put that HRV in, if I don't spend $8,000 of your money to put that HRV in, then you're not going to get certification and you're not going to be able to get a certificate of occupancy.
It's wild for me to think, though, that Vermont is literally the only state that doesn't have a building code.
Correct.
And that makes me wonder about how that's bad for Vermonters.
Yeah.
To have that just, the knock-on effects of that with, housing that may not be up to par, that's, not going to go the distance. That doesn't feel great either.
Yeah. So building codes across the country, not everybody enforces their building codes like Massachusetts does, right? I happen to build in Massachusetts, California, right? The highest. There are, I think, if Vermont wants to go down the path, and there are other people that can talk better about this than I can, I would go to the architects, because they are actually trained and licensed in all of this, and a lot of them have licenses in different jurisdictions, different states. There are different ways that codes work, right? So New Hampshire has a little bit more of a soft-handed code, right? Where at the state level, they do adopt a code. They say, here's a code minimum. We haven't even adopted a code. We don't even have a standard of care. Nothing's been adopted. They've at least adopted one statewide, and then they allow individual towns that want to administer it themselves to administer it themselves. And if a town doesn't want to administer it themselves, then it falls back to the state, right? And then the state it's hit or miss as to whether or not how any town or the state is actually applying the code, but at least there's one there. I think historically, I mean, end of the day, I would love to not have codes, right? They're a pain in the neck, right? It would be better to just, if you all just continued to trust us to build what we've always done, and allow us to do that. But that relied on the fact that somebody else wasn't telling us what standard we had to build to, right? And so we were building to stuff that we knew our experience was, right? I don't want to build something. It's bad enough if I build something once that we have a service issue on, like I'm not going to build it twice, right? So I adopt what I offer to clients and what we do based on what's worked and what hasn't worked. And I think Vermont we have the luxury of, we're a small state, and chances are you knew that builder, right? Or you went to school with that builder's kids, or your grandparents played bridge, whatever. Like there's some connections that allow kind of like this like honesty level. Is that, going to still be there going forward? I don't know. And does that scenario still work with advanced codes? Like, I don't think so.
Questions?
Well, I'll just jump in if I can, and thank Jason for coming in. Jason's been involved in this just for the committee. Jason's been involved in this, well, I guess in 2003, a long time since I've been involved in it anyway, and always has really useful things to say about his experience with codes and with energy codes and with building codes. And one of the things you were just talking about, Jason, was not having any codes at all. The thing about not having any codes that you've really impressed upon me is that makes the builder responsible and the builder liable for choices that he or she makes in the course of a construction project, which is, some contractors might not mind having that responsibility and liability, but the fact is they do have it, and that's an issue. If you don't have a code or a standard of care, and you don't have any administration, to say nothing of enforcement of that code, then the builder's on the hook. And
I think the builder is, if there isn't a code, there isn't a standard of care by which to have sued your builder, right? So if you can, and I think this is playing out in a couple places right now with a Chittenden County builder that's been sued for a couple items by a couple different people for a couple different things. Somebody can look this up, but I'm pretty sure that those cases have been kicked into contract law, not construction. Because as soon as somebody starts to make an argument that says you didn't build to code, the easiest defense is what code, right? There isn't one there. So it really comes down to, what did you agree to do for the client? Like what was your agreement with the client to provide?
That implies to me a level of knowledge and sophistication on the part of Vermonters about building science that I'm just not. I am not buying it. If a builder whom I trusted, there's also the whole handshake argument, which I am quite sure applies to you and most contractors, but certainly I'm sure not to all. But if I'm building a house from scratch and my contractor comes to me, who may or may not be building to the quality you or have the knowledge you have or the experience you have, and says, well, you can pay $40,000 more and do this, or you can skip it because it's not going to really be enforced. That's just not good long-term.
Where we are.
Yeah. So the part I'm pushing back against is the thought that, well, here we are at a fork in the road, and one idea would be, let's just not have any codes. That's makes no sense to me in terms of Vermonters' health and safety and the long-term quality of our housing stock and where we want to be 40 years from now, and having safe, durable, long-lasting homes for Vermonters. Just me.
Speaking out of my wheelhouse on that issue, I think that's also going to start lending itself or moving ourselves into funding issues as well,
Yeah,
right? Where we already know, like with zoning rules, right? If you don't have zoning rules, you don't qualify for FEMA flood insurance, right? When is some of that going to when is that? When is homeowners insurance? When is that going to start trickling into houses as well? It says when, underwriters start realizing, whoa, like this house, like how? Right? When does that start scratching? When does that get to us too?
yeah. And I don't agree it makes the contractor the bad guy. It makes the state. You were saying the client's gonna, and we're the bad guys. I don't think so. I think you just say we gotta build code and we're gonna get in trouble if we don't. So, blame it on government.
Yes.
Rep Klebner.
I'd make two observations. One, I agree with you that, especially because a lot of houses get sold within the first 10 years. Someone buys a house, has a house built, and then they sell it 2 years later. Someone else lives there for 8 years, and then the siding starts falling off. I'm not sure the first thought would be, well, let's go find the contractor. Or someone didn't build this right. It's just, oh, dang, my house has mold. Now I got to remediate. Right? Like that ends. The other thing I observed is, man, when you have a housing crisis, the last thing in the world you want is to build houses and then have them fall down. Like, you want every house you build to be there for 100 years. And it sounds like that may not currently be the case.
Rep Torrey.
Yeah, and I'll just add, when you have energy prices going up, the last thing you want is, sending that energy out the windows. But I'm wondering too, we saw tables last week from the architects showing that these states that do have building codes, that the energy codes they have in place were like 2021.
Correct.
They always lag.
Correct.
And it sounds like there's a real value in having that lag.
Correct. So what happens in states that have actual code programs, right? So legislature created an agency that will review, amend, adopt, implement, certify codes, right? So there's an agency doing it. A huge part of one of their largest roles is the reviewing and adopting. And so what happens is that they don't write these codes from scratch, right? There are model codes. There are model codes that are written that are, the model is amended from time to time with different stuff. And what happens in these states that have actual code programs is they will look at the new amendments, like say the energy code, they'll look at the amendments in the energy code, and because they are professionals, right? Because they are building professionals, right? They've built houses, they're staffed with people that have done this before. But they'll start recognizing that there's conflicts inside there. They'll start recognizing there's implementation conflicts. They'll recognize there's conflicts with the plumbing code, with the electric code, and with the building code. And they almost always amend them down. Or what they'll do is they just won't adopt them, right? They'll just say, we want to continue to take hearings on this. We want to continue to find the issues and sort through this. And so that puts them at a lag. I think New Hampshire's still in 2015. Like I think New Hampshire energy code still back in 2015. Vermont, before last legislative session, the enabling legislation of the energy code said that Vermont shall adopt the new energy. They shall amend the new energy code upon some issuance date of a model code. And so it put us like it was, they were adopting, right? Because we don't have, even though I was part of it, and I'm going to say I'm not expert enough to be part of this either. We were not amending it appropriately or being heard in our amendments to the code. And so we've ended up where we are. And when Vermont went to the 2024 RBs, we were the first ones to adopt this version of the energy code. I think by now there are a couple other states. Interestingly, I just heard yesterday that the new energy code, the new model energy code, the new version of it is walking back the continuous insulation standards that Vermont currently has in place, because they're realizing the implementation problem that is, right? That devil's in the details. It's easy to say this. It's really hard. It's really easy to screw that system up, right? Remember when I said that most builders are pretty good about keeping bulk water out of walls? Well, the hardest insulation system, the hardest wall you could build to try to keep water out of it is one that's wrapped in foam, right? Because it's not, you're relying on tapes. It's a messy wall system. And the international code is kind of recognizing that and walking back on some of those requirements. Yeah, so they're there because they actually have enough professionals reviewing the code to decide whether or not they were good to adopt.
Yeah.
So on your Vermont houses, do you follow the mass code when you're building? Because
we follow the code. We have to meet the codes, building, electrical, plumbing, energy, for where the house is being built. Right. So anything
for where it's being built,
for where it's being shipped to. So where the end location.
Okay.
End location. So if we build a house on Nantucket, right, we have to satisfy, they have much higher wind engineering requirements than we have in Vermont, right? We're worried about snow, they're worried about wind. And so we have to satisfy those local building requirements for anything that goes there. Now we as a company, in order to not like reinvent the wheel every single time based on whatever town, we've created our own kind of like hybrid master code that we just try to apply to everything. So we don't have to invent the wheel all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and how many houses did you say you built over the?
We've since 1978, we've built probably 5,000 houses.
I have a
So-
question. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go.
Well, you can go ahead, Chris. I'll jump in.
So 78 to 2024, you've seen the building code change and the addition of the first energy codes in 84 is when I got exposed to it. But were there mistakes made that to put a vapor barrier here and they put a fiberboard out here? So now we have essentially we built a plastic bag.
Correct.
And then I've been trying to review the code and it's pretty difficult, and it refers frequently to the statement of agency of authority if there is one. So that term, if there is one, tells me that they're trying to reflect maybe back with the New Hampshire model that the individual towns enforce codes.
So the Energy Futures Group and the Department of Public Service, bless them, right? Impossible task. As they're writing the codes, they're starting with a model code. And the model code assumes you have a building code. And so the model code is written reflecting everywhere authority having jurisdiction, AHJ, who's the building official. And so in the model code, it references this AHJ constantly. Department of Public Service, EFG gets that model code, and they try to adopt it locally. And they have to start now rewriting the model code because it assumed we have a program that we don't have. And so they had to, and I think the fastest way for them to do it is say, well, let's let the code still reflect the AHJ, but let's just put a bullet point in the very front that says, unless there isn't one.
I think it accounted for 3 or 4 of the 150 pages on the web
of where it was. Yeah. And so back to the first comment about, the vapor barriers, we, for a while, there was a requirement that we essentially build ourselves inside of balloons, right? Where we had vapor barriers. That was a code. It was a code requirement, but it was also an industry failure to understand. Right. We didn't understand it well enough to be telling ourselves what we were supposed to be doing. And we just didn't understand we got caught up in that, right? My father tells, this is, we're a family business. My father tells of all kinds of houses that we had to go into after the fact and go up into the attic, pull all the insulation out and cut back the vapor barrier that was in the attic. Because the house was just accumulating moisture and growing mold. Because what we were also doing at the time is we were fighting the way Vermonters had lived historically without anybody telling them you can't do that, right? You can't store 5 quart of firewood in your basement, right? And then have the rest of your house be inside a balloon, right? You're going to accumulate moisture when that dries out. Today, I think we just understand building science a little bit better. And you'll hear a lot of old builders say, "Oh, you gotta let house breathe." You know, that's nonsense, right? Houses don't breathe, people do. I don't think that that's the case, right? I do think we need to build things as airtight as possible, but as the code says you have to do, you then have to put a ventilation system inside the house, right? You can't not have the house exchange air via some mechanical ventilation system. That mechanical ventilation system costs $8,000. And so not all clients will pay for that, right? Not all, some of them are like, I don't need it, like scratch it. Don't put it in. I don't have $8,000 to spend. Or Chip and Joanna Gaines told me something else is more important, right? And I want to do this instead.
So is that where most of the failures to meet the energy code come from, and air exchange units? And
I think that's one of them. I think the air exchange is one of the big ones that isn't getting installed most of the time. I think basement insulation is missed a lot of the time. I don't think they're meeting the standards on that. And then there are a whole bunch of really small parts of the energy code that I dare say are missed on 99% of houses, which are, any water line in your house that carries water over 180 to 110 degrees, right? So a hot water line going to your shower, right, has to be insulated to R3, right? They're not, homeowners are not insulating water lines to R3, right? If there was an inspector that said, I will not give you a certificate of completion until that's insulated, they would be. But they're not right now.
That's not a bad idea to insulate cold water lines also against condensation. But anyway, I'll reserve my comments. I'll yield my time back to Rep. Torrey.
Okay, yield your time to Rep. Torrey.
I was just going to say, I'm very grateful to our plumber because I feel like he did some future proofing for us because we did need to change our heating system. We decided to do a ground source heat pump. We only have 110 degrees and it's working because of the way he did that work. So future proofing is really important. And I think that's part of what codes have in mind. But one thought I had, because I don't know a lot about building sciences, is there a way, because our homes are getting so smart, to have like moisture meters in the walls? Like, so you don't have to see decay before you know it's happening?
Yeah, I've buried them in walls before because I'm curious. I'm curious what's happening in there. And so we watch it and we monitor it, and 100%. Moisture levels by the end of February are getting dangerously high inside walls. And then by March, April, the way we build walls, there is enough energy movement through, and there is nothing on the outside kind of blocking the flow, that we can then watch that moisture level drop right back off again. We can watch it drop right back off again in the spring. And so the other, kind of just another bullet point to again about the collision course we're on with this higher energy codes, less energy movement to dry things out, more dangerous we're getting, higher risk and all that stuff. Concurrently, at the same time that all this is happening, is that our building materials are getting worse. right? And so the majority of houses are built with building materials that can actually take less water than old building materials could, right? So OSB sheathing doesn't take much water until it rots. New fast growth wall studs take a lot less water in them, right? So it's kind of like it's a
All right. We are at time. Thank you so much. That was really
yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
interesting.
Kids loved it. They were really, they were like, this sounds like science class.
I
Felt like they were paying attention. Maybe they just learned how to fake it.
How do you know? You had your back.
I'm
She's heard that.
They were like,
He's wrong about
and they didn't, you could tell, they didn't.
I take the time actually to I tour a bunch of schools, physics programs, the tech programs through our shop, and actually give them that whole thing because it's important. It's what's happening, right? It's the built world. It's what we live inside.
That's right.
I actually know more than I should know about these walls right here.
Oh, don't tell us.
There was a problem.
I know.
There was a problem with these walls.
There was. We had different problems with our previous committee room, so we moved to this problematic committee
When
room.
were there problems with these walls?
No, there was some. I know that there was. I don't know if it's outside this part of the building, but I know there were issues with mortar in the granite. There was some.
Because of moisture.
It was the wrong product used, and yes, had a lot to do with moisture. Water's anything. Remember that.
Yeah.
Water always wins.
Water always wins.
So we were.
Yeah.
I think it was the summer of 2018 that all these committee rooms got filled with mold, and they had to replace all the furnishings, all the carpets and everything in the House committee rooms because of summertime moisture.
On that note, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
That
for
was
having me.
actually super
Really, really.
interesting. Yeah.
I'll email what I wrote.
Yeah, please
Thank you, Rep.
do.
Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let's forge on ahead. So I think we'll probably have time. I'm sure we'll have time for a little break before 3:00.
Can I leave the door open for a minute?
Yeah,
Get
sure.
a little cross breeze.
Or just, we can just,
Just bring the be quiet sign there to next to it.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
okay, sounds good.
Bring it down the middle of the hall to tell them, remind them. You know,
That's actually a lot better.
That's
It is a
so
lot better.
nice.
Speaking of building science.
Yeah, a little cross breeze. Good thing.
Okay, Rick, whenever you're ready. All right, we are shifting gears, and we are going to talk about the Vermont Web Portal Board, which I think most of us just learned about for the first time last week. So we're surprise. So we are going to walk through the statute that established it and ask questions and ground ourselves, because then we're gonna have the Vermont Web Portal Board chair in tomorrow. So this is our background homework. But for the record.
Good afternoon. Yeah, Rick Sagel, Office of Legislative Counsel. Good to see you all again. I'm going to share my screen if you don't mind, Madam Chair.
Not at all.
So here to talk about the Vermont Web Portal, which I also did not learn or did not know a whole lot about until recently. I know the Secretary of ADS, Secretary Riley Hughes, was in here last week and talked about some things related to data, and also brought up the web portal and specifically the funding, how it's funded, and how she wants to make some changes to it. My presentation is going to be about just statutorily what it is, what they do, their powers, their limitations. And I think I'll also have some questions that I hope either the chair can address tomorrow, or if Secretary Riley Hughes wants to come back, She may know more about specific things that I don't know about, but this is mostly just informational, and be happy to answer questions. I just may not be able to answer them as well as you'd like me to.
Rick, I'm going to take notes then. Let me know when be explicit when you're saying, and this is a question I have.
Sure.
And I'll make sure that I'm writing it down.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the web portal was created in 2005. It's been amended a couple times, and I'll show you the amendments that have been made since about 20 years ago. So you see here the purpose of the portal is to increase at no cost to the taxpayer the ease of accessing needed information. So we have a few definitions. Public information means that any state data that are included within the information deemed to be public pursuant to the Public Records Act. And I believe you're having my colleague Tucker come in to talk about public records.
He already has, and he's going to come back. Can I just, I'm sure you're going to get to this, but I just want to stop you right even before we go on. So the web portal is all of Vermont.gov and it's infinite multi-paged expansiveness, right?
I don't know.
Okay.
One of the things I don't know the scope of what the web portal governs. Based on the secretary's testimony, it's the .gov landscape, Vermont.gov landscape. But I don't know if that includes like the legislature website. That is also a .gov website, Vermont.gov. But I tend to think that the Ledge IT governs that website, but I don't know. It's one of the questions I have.
Okay, and my other question is, and I'm sure we'll get there, is the fact that it specifically says in statute at no cost to the taxpayer, why we do the self-funding thing, because it specifically says this must be no cost.
Yeah, it's said there in the purpose, which is one thing, and later on,
okay,
you'll see actually the second definition is self-funded web portal. So whoever wrote this, passed this bill back 20 years ago, wanted it to be very clear that this is a cost neutral to the taxpayer, cost neutral system, the portal.
Okay.
So definition 2, self-funded web portal means the centralized electronic information system by which public information is disseminated or collected via the internet, supported entirely with fees collected for financial transactions through the portal. State data means any information stored, gathered, or generated in electronic or magnetic form by a state agency.
Question.
Yeah.
Magnetic form.
I don't know. Could be
Those old
floppy disks.
Oh,
Yeah.
This is 2005.
wow.
Handed
Yeah, physical.
person to person, like expanding,
Cassette tapes or magnetic media.
It's not defined. So 20 years ago, we're talking about magnetic form. Must be some kind of hard disk.
8-track?
Not
Thank you for getting my joke.
Not 1985. 2005. Web portal, Vermont Web Portal Board, or board means the board established in the next section of this statute. Okay, so 952 is creation of the web portal, and then also creating the board that governs the web portal. So you have the Secretary of ADS or designee, Secretary of State or designee, Secretary of Administration or designee, State Librarian, Court Administrator, the Chief Marketing Officer of ACCD, the Chief Data Officer of ADS, one member or designee who is an officer of the executive branch, other than the Department of Finance and Management, the ADS, and Department of Libraries, because they are. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
So I was just commenting that we must have cleaned. So would the legislature have cleaned this up, or would you have cleaned it up? Because it was not EDS at the time.
Yeah, there's been an amendment by the Assembly.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. 2 members appointed by the SEA. 1 member of the House, who is also a member of Jai Talk, appointed by the Speaker, and 1 member of the Vermont Senate, who is a member of Jai Talk, appointed by the Committee on Committees. The board annually elects one of its members as chair of the board and may also elect a vice chair and secretary. 6 members shall constitute a quorum, and the affirmative vote of 6 members shall be necessary for any action taken by the board. No vacancy in the membership of the board shall impair the right of a quorum to exercise all rights and perform all duties of the board. They shall meet at least semi-annually. This is at least twice, could be 20 times, just more than once a year. Members of the board, except for legislative members, shall serve without compensation, but shall be eligible to receive reimbursement for mileage and expenses. And then legislative members of the board shall be entitled to the same per diem compensation and reimbursement for actual and necessary expenses as per 2 VSA 23. So let me show you the first amendment. This is back in 2012. Actually, let me go with this one. This is 2020. So before ADS, we had a Department of Information and Innovation. So this is where the General Assembly updated the membership to include ADS as overseeing the development. We'll get to that section here in a second. But right now you just have replacements of the Department of Information and Innovation with ADS. Here you have the agency administration replaced with ADS. A grammatical change. And again, replacing the former department with ADS. This is 2020.
How do you find this stuff?
Research. So there's
That's amazing.
I didn't mean that to come off. So if you go
No,
to,
and I didn't mean that to be flip either. It's just like, where did you find this?
so at the end of every section statute
Yeah.
that's been in the last
So you
40
go back
years.
into the, yeah.
So you see, let me show you when it's not been amended. This here, the purpose
Yeah.
was added in 05.
Yeah.
This is the act number.
Okay. So you
So-
can go back and find it.
Yeah, and we on the Vermont website, if you go here to acts and results, you can search through. It goes way back to the.
How far back do the digital? I only tend to look at the past.
So before 2000,
sections.
before 2005, you have to use a different web portal,
Okay.
and this is how I found. This is the when it was added. This is the act that I showed you all, Act 203. This is when it was created back in 05. So I can show you later offline how to get to it, but there are ways to access the subacts. Or we have a library.
Yeah.
You go over to 2 and you can pull up all the acts and results going way back in time. Hard copies. Back to the amendments. This.
So we're in
Here we
2020
go.
still?
Yes.
Okay.
I skipped ahead. So this is again, this is 2020. This is when it was changed. It was 10 members when it was created on the board. It was increased to 12, and they replaced the Commissioner of Information and Innovation with the Secretary of ADS. Just some grammatical changes. They added the Chief Marketing Officer of ACCD. They added the Chief Data Officer of ADS. This is just grammatical, this one here. So those were the changes because of ADS being created in 2017 and that department shutting down innovation and information. Okay, let me go back to the current statute. Just for some background information. So the duties of the board. The board shall oversee the development of a self-funded web portal and establish charges for the services it provides. Oversee development, implementation, and promotion in cooperation with ADS of electronic commerce and digital signature applications involved in the state of Vermont. Serve in an advisory capacity to ADS and other state agencies regarding the dissemination and collection of state data to and from the citizens and businesses of Vermont. Seek input from the general public, users of the web portal, professional associations, academic groups, and institutions and individuals with knowledge or interest in computer networking, electronic mail, public information access, gateway services, add-on services, and electronic filing of information. Accept gifts, donations, and grants for the support of the Vermont web portal.
Can we talk about that for a minute?
Sure.
That's weird. But I feel like I've seen that somewhere else. I feel like there are times when we authorize startup things or continue things, and we want to make it explicit that if somebody wanted to make like a charitable donation to help the Vermont web portal, they could. Is that unusual or weird? That seems so strange to me, but I know it's not the first time I've
Well,
seen it.
cost neutral would open the door for that.
That's something, to see language like that on our school district and meetings, allowing us to do that.
Or maybe if like, you don't need to have that kind of language in there to get like a federal grant, do you? No, we're talking about like charitable donations, right? Or, oh, Google. Interesting.
Google does not.
Huh?
Does that have anything to do with being a nonprofit?
I don't know.
It's give me a cow.
I'd be curious to learn more about that. It really just for my self edification, but I also kind of want to ask Mr. Lipinski about whether we ever get.
They may never have gotten one.
I'd be surprised, but maybe we're just totally wrong.
They can, but nobody's offering.
You know, maybe there's a family foundation out there that like thinks this is their passion project.
Right. I don't see too often this language. There's been a couple bills I've been associated with that were it's a board or commission where they don't get paid, they don't get reimbursed, and so there's language there that the commission can raise money to support itself. So this is kind of what it's getting at, that they're able to raise, accept gifts, donations, and grants, which would support the web portal. In addition to it being self-funded, then they would have this excess pot of money, right, that they could use. But I don't know if you need this language. It doesn't hurt to be able to accept, a donation. Certainly of money. Number 6, oversee drafting and implementation by the Agency of Digital Services of the contract with the web portal service provider. This contract shall comply with state security and privacy standards. So I have not been able to find the web portal contract. It'd be great if the ADS could send that to either you all and I can get it, or they can send it directly to me. But I'd be curious to see what the contract includes.
Okay. Can I ask?
Subsection B, all state agencies shall cooperate with the board in providing assistance as it may request for the achievement of its purpose. Services and information to be provided by any agency shall be specified pursuant to a written agreement between the board and the agency. And then finally, any charges created or changed by the board shall be approved as follows. All such charges, shall be submitted to the governor, who shall send a copy of the approval or rejection to the Joint Fiscal Committee through the Joint Fiscal Office, together with the following information with respect to those items. A, the cost, direct and indirect, for the present and future years related to the charge. B, the department or program that will utilize the charge. C, a brief statement of purpose. And D, the impact on existing programs if the charge is not accepted. The governor's approval shall be final unless within 30 days following receipt of the information, a member of the Joint Fiscal Committee requests the change to be the charge. I'm not seeing that word very well. Charge be placed on the agenda of the Joint Fiscal Committee, or when the General Assembly is in session, be held for legislative approval. In the event of such request, the charge shall not be accepted until approved by the Joint Fiscal Committee or the General Assembly. During session, the Joint Fiscal Committee shall file a notice with the House Clerk and Senate Secretary for publication in the respective calendars of any charge approval requests that are submitted by the administration. And beginning July 2012 and every 3 years after, all web portal fees shall be included in the annual consolidated executive branch fee report pursuant to 32 VSA 605. So that's the end of the statute. That fee report, starting I think in 2023, in the budget, they've changed how that is collected. Each agency and department every, I think, 2 or 3 years is required in the budget to submit their annual fee report to JFO, and then JFO has that information. There's no longer a one executive branch fee report. And this is a long way of me saying that I could not find these web portal fees. I had a tough time finding any web portal fees. It could be that I couldn't find it. It could be that I was not able to locate where these fees were, but I would imagine that ADS in their semi-annual fee report would include these web portal fees, but I couldn't find it. So that would be good to have too, is to have that report of the fees collected to the website.
Say to me that again. So every 3 years, there's supposed to be a consolidated executive branch fee report submitted to joint fiscal, but
So
that changed?
Well, yes. So this is specific to the web portal, that every 3 years they have to do this, right?
Yeah.
Every year, the executive branch is supposed to submit the fee report to the joint fiscal committee, to the joint fiscal office. But my understanding is that recently JFO through the budget has required each department, each agency to submit their own fee report instead of a consolidated report. Because I think it was difficult to understand. It was too bloated. So now you have a much more specific report from each department or agency that discloses their fees collected the last, in this case, it should be the last 3 years, for the web portal fees.
I think the secretary said that they have a contract with the vendor and the vendor's collecting all those fees. So,
but the state should still be,
yeah,
at some point in possession of those fees.
Yeah. No,
tracking it.
The money,
or at least tracking it.
The money goes to the vendor as a part of the deal of the. Am I remembering this correctly?
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to remember what you're remembering.
I think she said that the way the contract works with the vendor is they collect the fees as part of their compensation. But we did ask her to get transparency on those fees. I think we should be able to at least know what they are. Right. Yeah.
She's coming in. This week. But I don't know when. Jack, is Secretary Riley Hughes is coming in, right?
This week? I don't believe so. No.
Okay.
So I was going to show you that there is a web page for the web portal board, and it's through the ADS website, and they list the board, the current members. So you see there's 2 vacancies, and those are the 2 members of the legislature. But otherwise, there's currently 10 members on the board. And they also post their upcoming meetings. There's one on May 1st. The agenda.
We should go.
Is that tomorrow?
Wednesday? With their Thursday? No, Thursday.
Pretty good agenda.
We're here.
What time is it?
So this is their agenda for Web First. May 1st. Web First. And they do have minutes from the previous meetings. I scanned them briefly. A lot of it is contract review in executive session.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't be able to stay for that unless you're on the web board, which there should be 2 of you. Not in this room, but
yeah.
2 members both have to be on Jog Talk. Rep Sevilla and
we have an appointee.
Rep Campbell is also right on Jog Talk.
No, I think Rep Sibilia has actually been appointed, right?
Has Rep Campbell not been appointed to Jackbox?
Yes.
Oh, to Jive Talk? I thought you were talking about the web portal board.
I'm talking, well, both, I suppose.
Okay,
It shows here it's
so-
vacant.
Yeah, Reps, Campbell, Sibilia, and Priestley have been appointed to Jive Talk, and that was announced on the floor. And then, I don't know about this, when that happened.
Well, there should be two
Anyway, moving on.
legislative members.
Oh, there.
One from House and one from Senate,
Right,
right?
but both of them be on Jive Talk
Yeah,
as well.
okay.
And just to show you all the fee report, so you can pull up the last one is 2021, where it was all one branch fee report. But even in these, I cannot find the web portal fees because it may just be going directly to the vendor. That might be what's happening. I can't see that. If you want to look at department by department, you'd have to go through I can show you later, go through our website, and there's a legislative research link, and you can pull up each agency's fee report by year. So that's a walkthrough of the web portal. I think I got across my main concerns were the fees, how those are being collected, and maybe not collected. Maybe they're just going straight to the vendor. The contract that the web portal board has with this vendor, what that contract looks like. And really what's the scope of the web information, this public information? Is it just the Vermont.gov websites? Are there other websites that are also through this web portal? It's not clear what they have control over.
Rick, if you have just a second to send us those questions, just
sure
how what you want us to look at, and then you'll probably be here, or maybe not. Are you able to come tomorrow?
What time?
9.
Oh, I'll be right there. Across the other room.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I might be able to pop in.
Okay. Well, if you can send us just, get your questions in writing so we make sure that we explore them for you. We can find out tomorrow.
And we those if you report, need to me a link to where it was.
Yes.
Why don't you send that to the whole committee?
Sure.
Yeah. And then after starting in 2022, the fee reports are you search by agency or something?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And I'll include that in my email.
Great. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Any other questions for Rick? All right. Rick, thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's like a big mystery.
It is a big mystery. I love mysteries.
Yes.
All right. Well, then we're back at 3. And I think we can go off live and take a break until